And today's webinar will be about the research problem and the solution bias and why it is so hard to let go of old habits. We will cover a number of topics such as what constitutes a research problem, what is a solution bias. We will look on how to keep a problem focus and understand that actually search tools and information also come frequently along with a solution bias, and that there are problems and problems. And finally, we will look on some guides and lenses that one might wear once reading. Now, for the first, what constitutes a research problem? It is definitely not a solution. It is not a question, so it shouldn't have a question mark at the end. It's not a title, and certainly not the title of your thesis, and it's not an opinion or a specification. Now, common characteristics of a research problem. First of all, it's a situation that is broke. Second of all, it comes with some cause and effect relationship. Having said that, it might not be visible, this cause and effect relationship, or not obviously visible. And there might also not be direct relations that can be observed or that are that perhaps first need to be uncovered. For example, if you take a wicked problem, that well can be a problem to someone, but not to everyone, and it comes along in very different forms, and it's a very different thing to work with. So with problems you usually will find where more than two humans come together, where you have different perceptions, where at different times things might or might not be problematic, so it's very contextual, and therefore cause and effects are difficult to observe. Likewise, boundaries might be difficult to observe. However, each problem will have some boundaries, and it is on us to establish those as precisely as possible, because only that makes a research problem handleable. A research problem is also abstract and not, no, it's real, not abstract or hypothetical. And this is often an issue because opportunities that are seen or changes that are going on are often problematic because their problematic one doesn't know how to behave or act. That doesn't mean, however, that we have here a real problem at hand, but just that the situation is perhaps not understood, and therefore we have a problem on how to act. Now, real problems, however, can be observed, and there's evidence that can be looked at. And characteristics of a research problem are also that they are either the start point or the end point of your research journey. Now, if something is relatively clear to you, then very likely the research problem will be the starting point. However, if you just look at some situation that is troublesome, worrisome, but you don't really understand it, then very likely the research problem will be the end point of your research, means you will focus on building up a clear understanding what the exact problem is. And we will look at two examples to learn about exactly those different situations. Now, this is a clear situation where the problem is a starting point. We have an organization that is showing a high fluctuation rate, and we do understand already that the leadership team is lacking some people management skills, and this is the origin for the high fluctuation rate. So we see here a situation that is clearly broke. We understand there is a cause and effect relation, and there is an initial body of evidence that we have because we, for example, work in that organization and we have observed how things are behaving and working out. So in this case, the research problem is your starting point. And while the problem seems to be clear, what we do now at the very next step is we ask, why is the leadership team lacking people management skills? So we try to get down to the root of the problem. So they are still very much unknown that likely will be uncovered as we go along. Now, contrary to that, the research problem might be also the endpoint. I take here a very concrete case. Some years ago, I had a student who worked at a university at the admissions office, and it was highly desirable to have a cultural rich student population. Therefore, there was a practice of trying to use affirmative actions so to get in students from many cultures and backgrounds. However, legally, that was not allowed to use affirmative action, except under very certain circumstances. So the student started out with being exposed to a very complex situation and not knowing how to behave. So you could say, right, in this situation, we study the entire legal framework so we understand very well what's going on. And this, in a nutshell, is exactly what the student did. And as it turned out, it was not only a very complex situation, but the legislations, the federal legislations, the regional legislations, they were contradicting each other. And therefore, it was not possible to enact one common strategy. So this, as it turned out at the end, was not only a complex situation, but it was a situation where the real problem was laying within the contradicting legislations, and therefore, whatever one tried to do, it was virtually impossible to comply to all laws. So in this example, the problem is only very well understood at the end point of the research journey. So we start the research with the understanding that we are acting in a very complex situation, but we do not know why. Why do I have on a day-to-day basis troubles of adopting the right admission policy and behavior? Wherever I look at, I find information that is not adding up. So at the end of the journey, it's clear why it is. The legal framework has been looked at and the contradicting laws have been worked out. So this is the end point of the research, and based upon that, the behavior can now be changed. Now, as we move into the second part of the webinar, are there any questions on the first part? Good, then let's move further. So what is a solution bias? Now, the point here is that it is very tempting to work towards solution and to improve something, because ultimately, this is what you are expected to do on a day-to-day basis. So wherever you will be looking at your first way of seeing things as what is not working, now let's fix it. And there you go off, and 99.9% you now will spend on trying to work towards a solution. Meanwhile, from a research perspective, 99.9% you should be spending on the research problem. Now, unfortunately, the solutions are much more exciting, and it is very rewarding, and by times it's also very urgent to come up with solutions. And in particular, if you are a student who is carrying out the research within the work environment, so you are looking at a workplace-based problem, and that certainly comes with some urgency. And if it doesn't come with some urgency, there's also usually not much interest in taking on that problem. Therefore, you would move to something else. And again, you would identify something that becomes more urgent. And that actually leads to a sort of rush. Now, there is a clear understanding why organizations find it difficult to learn. And one is a bias towards success. And that comes very often bundled with a bias towards actions. Engaging in quick actions is really what we see students are doing at the first. So even once the research proposal is just under the making, there's already much thought going into how do I work, what will I do, which questions do I ask. So before looking into the problem, the move is already going towards working on the solution. Yeah. Good. I'm going to mute everyone. So if you do have a question, please unmute your microphone. So there is a rush to build solutions. But more problematic or often coming together is opportunities. As earlier said, if there are changes in the environment, for example, the uptake of information communication technologies, the digitization of the economy, all of that provides a lot of opportunities. And opportunities are, again, exciting. Now, unfortunately, what happens is, again, one is just looking into the opportunity and hypothetically looks into what could be done. And the real problem then that comes is a lack of information on how to behave. However, this is not an interesting problem usually to the students. Therefore, what should be looked at and what should be asked is not what the energy will be spent on. So opportunities are a very dangerous thing from a research perspective, because a lot of times what then should be the research focus is not where the interest and motivation of the student is to carry out research. If that is understood. Good. Now, how to keep a problem focus? As a matter of fact, it's pretty easy, actually. If you stay at the dark side, you are safe. Wherever it feels inconvenient, wherever it is hurting, wherever you do not want to be, this is usually where the problem is. Because ultimately, the bright and shiny thing is how you would like things to work out. Therefore, this will be the ultimate solution and the place how you envision it to be. And this is not where the research problem originates. So whenever things are inconvenient, the likelihood is good you're looking at a problem. Wherever things get shiny, the likelihood is great you are on the wrong side. Now, this is however, deeply rooted behavior, and therefore one really needs to understand and always remind oneself, where am I? What am I exactly looking at? So there are some simple tricks or some simple tips on testing yourself on where you are. First of all, look at the context. What is happening around me? Where am I? So that means you should rather reflect instead of act. Reflection is a great thing to assure you're at the problem end. Engage in critical analytics, so look at evidence and pieces rather than work over beliefs and desires. Now, this admittedly takes a lot of time, and it is much more painful than acting to work over beliefs, desires, or also acting towards just looking at the outcome focus of how you want to have things. This is quick and easy. Now, we don't want quick and easy. We need it a bit more slow and painful. So we look into all of the evidence. We focus on the process. We look how things relate to each other, and we question it. We don't conclude, which is very important. First of all, start with the questioning. Look at all of the pieces of evidence, and only then, over the analytics, work towards the concluding element. And we engage ideally also with all of those stakeholders to whom the problem relates. So this is very important. It's not about talking only with experts. It's about talking with stakeholders to whom the problem relates. And as an ultimate tip, do not rush, take time. So as initially said, students are often quick in putting together their methods even before they know what they will look at. So before you know, okay, this is a questionnaire, and then you gamble for which type of questions you might want to ask. First, understand the problem, and from there, the questions will emerge anyway. And over related studies, you will identify which type of methods have been deployed earlier, and that will guide you on how you might want to take your research further. With this, let us move into the next section and understand that the solution bias actually is also very, very much in the search tools and information that we use on a day-to-day basis. Now, I conducted a simple exercise whereby I asked Google 3 things. I first looked into the solution bias, which is the focus of today's webinar. And there were, on a global base, 8,680 results. Now, if I wouldn't be very sure what I'm talking about, I might think I was asking Google the wrong thing. Compare that to Business Solution, which produces a shiny 7 million something results. Now, you need to be really sure that something like a solution bias exists to act over 8,600 results. And now let's look into the third Google result by Googling for solution business. 3 million something results. Now ask yourself, what is a solution business? Now, those were some results that Google was producing, and it is pointing to even some very well-established journals in the scientific field. But looking into them, none of these does really seem to make sense. What is a solution business? I mean, any type of business certainly would want to generate something that is working. So shouldn't be something to be talked about. But published research as a term, a business model, a department in a company, really? A business branch or a market? No, the results, the 3 million something results that Google produced didn't make really much sense if you looked into them one after the other. And I invite everyone to do the test oneself and to understand what type of results Google produced. So, what does that mean? We are framed by solutions in an apparent solutions-driven world, and where each tool that is available to us has and comes with a solution bias. So we need to be very sure about what we are doing, because we can, as we have just seen, not rely that much on the help of technology. So, as long as you stay at the dark side, or whatever you want to call the side, as long as it's hurting, painful, broke, makes you feel bad, is not a solution or gambling, those are the things where you can control and check yourself. Am I on the right side? Am I still dealing with a research problem? Now, and that is the next thing. A problem is not a problem, is not a research problem. Problems are not the same. You might want to understand that there is a difference in between a problem as such and a problem to you. Now, a problem to you might not qualify as a research problem. So what do I mean? I'm in a troublesome situation. My company goes bankrupt. I'm not having any money left. I need to file bankruptcy. Certainly, my family will now struggle with me together. No food, perhaps I'm homeless. Now, this is a clear problem to me, but it is not a research problem. There's nothing broke in that situation except that I'm broke. But the legal system, the economic framework is explicitly designed for organizations and even individuals to declare bankruptcy. Nothing broke in there. So please understand, you cannot do research on something that is not a research problem. So also there, it is important to see what are we looking at. Now, in the final part, the role of guides and the lenses that one adopts. Guides are a tricky thing because as much as the tools and information might come with a solution bias, the guides come with a very different issue at hand, so to say. They are written by people that are usually knowledgeable. They are knowledgeable about research. It is clear to them that whatever they write will start from a research problem, which first of all needs to be studied and understood. The relevant literature needs to be mapped out. It needs to be analyzed against that literature, and based upon that, any steps are taken then. Now, if those knowledgeable authors write guides, they might provide the wrong messages to research novices. Therefore, they are to be read with care. Likewise, it is important to understand what is the audience of those guides, because they might be targeted at someone where the message and outcome needs to be very positive. So therefore, it is also important to understand to whom is it guided. So in addition to that, if we read some guides on how a thesis is compiled, it always looks like this would be a linear undertaking. Start with writing chapter 1, introduction. Afterwards, please do the literature review. Chapter 2, then please go into the methodology chapter 3, and write that up. Then please, those guides are not really helpful because research is nothing that's taking place in a linear manner. It's a back and forward way of work. It's a juggling front and back, and things need to be gradually worked out and mirrored. So therefore, all guides that suggest linearity might do so for readability and to provide you with some sort of structuredness. However, you also need to have the right lens and understand that this is not the way of work. So you're not finishing chapter 1 to then start working on chapter 2. You're not just writing a proposal to then just do the literature review, to then do the methodology. No, that's not how it works. So please adopt the right lenses, and also with regards to every type of reading that you have. We have been running a number of webinars on all of those matters, so be welcome to check those out. There you will, for example, also see that many of the research reports that are available publicly are not really targeted at you at all. They are first and foremost targeted at those that were funding the research, and therefore they will also convey a message that is very different to the research message or to the messages that you would find in journal publications. So please do understand to have the right lens depending on what you're reading. Now, with this, I'm coming to the final slide for today. And I just want to point out that our system allows you to schedule dates for any type of webinars, courses, workshops, residencies that you would like to see, including the learning cafes, which we have recently introduced. So just give us a thumbs up if you want to see a certain action taking place at a certain time, and we will look into the feasibility of getting you the right date. With this, let me stop the recording.